Hello everyone, welcome to another comic book video. My name is Michael. Today we're going to start looking at a couple videos, series of videos that we'll be looking at variant covers. So just to give you a brief idea, a variant cover is a form or version of something that differs in some respect from a standard. So when we talk a lot about times about comic books, we're talking about differences from what would be the standard comic of an issue that comes out. So for most of the time when we talk about variants, we're talking about different covers. But there are other types of variants as well. You have, from the 70s, they were called price variants. These were variants that Marvel would do when they were getting ready to raise their prices of the issue. They would release a small select number of an issue with the new price, with the higher price, and release them in test markets just to see how well they would do. And then from those results, they would decide to go ahead and raise their prices. You also had what were called Mark Jeweler variants, which were comics that had an insert in them for a company called Mark Jewelers where you could order jewelry and stuff. Those inserts were not in all the comics, they were only released in select areas as well. But when we usually talk about variants, we're usually talking about, as I mentioned, the covers, and that really got started in the late 80s, about 1986. The first one really was Man of Steel #1. It was released with two different covers. It was successful, so a lot of the other companies started getting into it as well. And so I'm going to start just talking a little about some of the different types of variants that are available. So today I'm mostly going to be talking about what are called incentive variants or ratio variants or AB covers. They have several different names. What these are covers that are actually when a comic book store or a place of business orders comics, what they'll do is they'll order say like Marvel DC will say, if you buy say like 15 copies of the main comic cover, we'll give you this variant cover. Or if you do 20 issues or 25, if you order 25, then you're entitled to get this other variant cover and stuff. So in many ways, it's an incentive to try and get comic shops and other businesses to order more copies in the hopes that they can then get this variant cover. Which the idea being, if they can get this variant cover, they can actually probably sell that for more than what the regular issue would be worth. And then they can make up the profit of, even if they have, say, like 4 issues that don't sell right away and are sitting in a long box, they make up their money by ordering this variant cover. So I'm just going to show some of these different ratio variants. So we're talking about ratio, we're talking about like 1 in 25, 1 in 50, 100. There's very common, especially among DC and Marvel, sometimes they'll do what I call like 1-on-1 ratios or A and B covers. These are pretty much, they give a comic shop the option, they can order as many copies of each cover as they want. So to provide an example, I have Action Comics 1000. This was issue celebrating just the 1000th issue of Action Comics. For these, DC did a whole bunch of different covers to celebrate. They did what was decade covers like the 30s, 40s, 50s and stuff, but you could order as many copies of these different covers as you want. Now there were some other covers that were more the ratio, higher ratio, that you had to order so much before you could get it or anything like that. But this is actually the main cover. Cover will be considered cover A of Action Comics 1000, so this was the main cover that was put out. And then I have here another cover. This is the 1930s variant by Steve Rude, but this will be like considered like a B cover, or this will be a variant cover. But as I said, a store could order as many of these as they want. There wasn't any stipulations on how much they had to order of the main cover. Another thing that some of the comic companies are doing, and DC is one of them, is they'll do A and B covers or 1-on-1 ratio covers. But the variant cover may actually be a little more expensive. For instance, with Legion of Superheroes, it's a title that's coming out currently from DC. The main cover only costs like $3.99 or something like that. But if you want to get the variant cover, a store could order as many of the variant covers they want, but it's actually $1 more expensive. So these are more like $4.99. So as I said, a store can order as many copies of either cover as they want. However, for the customer, if you want the variant cover, you're paying an additional $1, which in some ways may actually make these covers a little more rare and harder to find, just because a lot of stores may not order as many because they know customers may prefer just getting the standard cover that's cheaper. But I do have a couple of the more higher ratio variants. These are the ones that are more exclusive. These are the ones where you have to pretty much order so much in order to buy them. So I have here Infinity #1. This was a Marvel Comics event that happened a few years back. This series, you may recognize some of the characters and stuff. The Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, some of the stuff that came from this series actually made it into the movie. You may recognize some of the character in the cover. This was one of Thanos' chief lieutenants that also showed up in those movies as well. This is a 1:50 ratio variant, which means if a comic book store wanted to get this cover, they had to order 50 of the regular cover in order to be able to get this. And then the final cover I have is more of a higher end ratio variant. Hopefully you'll be able to see that. This is DC's You're the Villain #1. This is a 1:250 ratio variant by Alex Malev. So, for pretty much for a store to get this, they had to order 250 of the main cover in order to be able to obtain this. Now, there are some pretty high ratio variants ones out there. I've seen some that are up to like 500 or something like that. So you're only talking about some of the online stores or some of the really big comic book chains and stuff who will be able to get these type of covers. Now this one actually is fairly inexpensive. You can actually find a decent copy of this for like 20 bucks or something like that. I did get mine as a 9.8 slab from CGC, so it was a little more than that, but it still wasn't anywhere near the cost. The way it's sometimes described with ratio variants with pricing, the rule of thumb usually is that you'll pay whatever the ratio variant is. So like for this one, technically speaking, you would pay 250. Since it's 1:250, you would pay 250. However, I pay nowhere near that, and there's a lot of differences and stuff. For instance, variant covers for key issues will go more than maybe if it's a 1:25 variant. If it's a key issue, they may sell for a lot more than that. A lot of times it depends on who the artist is. If it's a key issue, what the series is, who's on the cover, stuff like that, can all affect this. So while this is a higher end ratio variant, it's also a fairly inexpensive ratio variant as well. So that's all I have for today, is talking about ratio variants. I'll be back next week talking about some of the more interesting or some of the more harder to get or more unique type of variants that are available. So I hope you liked this video, and if you did, just go ahead and give it a like, and I'll see you next week.